Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another 3.25 Path of Exile video, and today I'm going to talk about minion tier listing, I guess, but mostly talking about what I think will be the meta of minion builds leading into 3.25. I'm going to crack into the video right away, but before we do so, I'm going to ask you guys for a favor. Support the channel a lot, so if you do hit the like button and subscribe for more content, if you find yourself enjoying this type of content, that supports the channel so much, and I really appreciate that. Let's crack into the video, see if you enjoy it first. I'm not going to waste anyone's time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the S tier first, and therefore you don't have to waste your time. I'll go through them as fast as I can to avoid wasting people's time. Obviously, I think that I might actually league start with a build called the Zoomancer. It's something a friend of mine, Mr. Helmbreaker, and I have been working on together for, I think it's 15 or 16 months now. Pretty cool. Helmbreaker is actually going to start making his own written guides moving forward and has a poison Zoomancer in store. I've seen a low-budget version of this in action. It looks fantastic. We'll see what he can cook up for the upcoming league launch. I think it's going to be one of those S-tier performance versions. And I also believe that the cold version will be in similar fashion that I'll be doing and updating as well before 3.25 launches. So we're going to put the Zoomancer build on the S-tier. The other build we have is obviously made by Previ, the god behind Bama, Reaper, and I would say Soul Rest as well. The guy's fucking made of steel when it comes to these type of builds. It's insane to see him in action. Bama was popular a couple leagues ago, was popular last league, and it's gonna be just as strong in the coming 3.25 release as well. Very excited to see that. I believe most of you guys watching this content have checked out his videos. You want to check them out again, trust me. Bama's gonna be an S-tier build. Guaranteed, especially with the Affliction Spectres coming back. Even if they were to be nerfed to the ground, they would still be making this build skyrocket in efficiency. Another build that's pretty cool was actually a Holy Relic of Conviction. This is a Transfiguration gem. Best way to approach this build is actually to level up with Absolution and then farm the 2 trans gems in Merc Lab yourself. That is a Transfigured Lancing Steel of Spraying and Holy Relic of Conviction, both of which are the only version of the Transfigured Gem for these skills, making the Merc Lab the easiest way to find them yourself, unless you want to buy them if they're not too expensive, and Absolution is a solid way to level. This makes the Holy Relic of Conviction build a very effective way to start your league out, get started, get the Merc Lab, farm these things, and then just skyrocket in terms of efficiency from there. Balor Mage made a poison version out of this. There's a link to this guide in the descriptions below. And the one I made is a cold conversion version out of this. And I think that both of these are top tier performer S-tier builds themselves. So do check them out if that's something that you'd like to play. Speaking of Balor Mage, another popular build that he's made has been basically going rampant for quite a few leaks now is the Poison SRS. This is something that I was doing the written guide for on PoE Vault. Balor Mage has since actually joined the PoE Vault website and actually are making his own written guides, and he's taken over that written guide that we were working on together. So I would have to refer to his guide when it comes to the Poison SRS build. It's going to be very fun to see how he's going to adapt the build for this in 3.25 now that we are going to have Divine Blessing removed. I do believe he's going to look into the Guardian's Blessing approach for the Necromancer. Just my thoughts on it. We'll see how he cooks it up. But I'm definitely going to see this build being sitting very comfortably at an S tier. So that basically summarizes the S tier builds, which I would say probably in order of efficiency from my personal take, would be Zoomancer and Bama on a split spot, and then we have Holy Relic and Poison SRS on a split spot right after. It's a matter of personal preference. They're all 4 going to be S tier performing high-end minion builds. Moving over to the A teams, we've got the Spectre builds. There's obviously links in the descriptions to the guides. This is something that I made myself. It's a Wretch Defiler approach. I'm not sure if Balor Mage has a written guide for this yet, but he did make a marionette bomber from the actual Spectres from Affliction League. But since we don't know how well these will perform until we see more information, I can't recommend it just yet. But if they do perform well enough, do keep your eye out on those builds. I know a lot of you guys like that kind of approach. I'm a big fan of the tier 17 Wretch Defiler Spectres, and that build is an A tier performing Spectre build. So if you like that, make sure you check that out. Another build is actually from the guy who's being referred to as the Zombie Father. It's Sir Mustache. Big fan of your content if you're watching this video, by the way. It's so good. Love it. The build you have is a Zombie Mancer that I'm happy to promote to the community because it's a very high performing fun niche build but still packing that performance to put this in an A tier in this tier list video. Next up, we have my very own Poison ranged animate weapon build. I'm going to put this in a solid A tier as well. The only problem with Poison and ranged animate weapon is actually the survivability of the weapons in higher tier 8 heavy content like tier 17s. So I think you're going to need a lot more currency than you would want to, maybe than you'd expect to spend on like a meta build like the S tier builds. But when it comes to the actual Poison range animate weapon, it's a very effective, fast clearing map and a very fun build to play. But if you want to push it to the next level, you're gonna have to invest a bit more currency, and that is why we're gonna put this on an A tier and not an S tier performance because of that reason. Another A tier build is the Herald of Purity build. It's very, very solid, top performing build. Similar issue to the Poison range animate weapon, but the problem is not so much survivability of the weapons, but rather yourself whilst keeping the damage output solid and high enough to maintain higher tier content like tier 17s. Now, it is possible. I've done it myself a couple of times. I did it on a test just last night in a tier 17. It's going to be very fun to see how this will hold up with all the changes moving into tier 17. Sorry, moving into 325 with all the new base defensive gear and all the defensive layers we can get. That should be able to compensate the downside of this build for that level of content for the higher end game. The next A tier build is made by Face Place. I do have a written guide made for him in link to the descriptions below, of course. And that is the Iron Mass Lightning build. A couple of mandatory items required to make this build work. We're bypassing the necessity of Divine Blessing being removed by having the March of the Legion boots that gives us access to this skill. This will allow us to be in a position where we can still benefit from the full glory of Divine Blessing without having the gem. And the Lightning version of Iron Mass is actually really cool. The only downside of this, in my opinion, is that the clear speed is okay. Not great, not good. It's okay, but excels very much at single target boss damage, but it's a lot of buttons to press and a bit gear sensitive. If it's something you really like to play, I can strongly recommend testing it out. It's been a very fun build to engage with, especially for bossing, and the more gear you put into it, the crazier the damage output gets. It's absolutely absurd. Another build of mine that I really enjoy playing is Chains of Command. It's one of my personal favorites. Main reason I don't touch it too much is because it's all gated behind the Animate Guardian, which is also why we're going to put this on an A tier. I think Chains of Command is one of those A+, S- kind of tier build in general, but I always put it down a little bit because the problem with the build is that if you're not comfortable or have a full understanding of how this build works or how the Animate Guardian works, you'll find yourself in a more unfortunate situation more often than not where your Animate Guardian dies. And in this build, if your AG dies, the entire build becomes unplayable. And you have to go back to town, re-gear your Animate Guardian to be able to play again, because that's how this build works. Very cool build, smacking it in on an A tier listing because of that. The last A tier build we have in this video is Dominating Blow. Why is this on an A tier? They're buffing melee, GHAZZY. It should be higher. No. The way Dominating Blow excels is on League starting by requiring essentially nothing to get going. The build's very comfortable. It deals with all of the Voidstone bosses without problems and barely any type of gear whatsoever. The problem is high-end scaling. If you want to push this to tier 17s, it's not something I would recommend. You would need to spend a ton of currency to do so. If you want to push this to doing Uber bosses, it is possible. It takes a lot of work and a bit of currency to get to that state, even with the buffs, right? However, I will say this, it is one of the more fun experiences of clearing maps. If you just want to blast tier 16 maps, red maps, without having barely any investments, it's a great fucking build. It's so good for that purpose because of how effective it is at League starting. If you just want to get up in level with something simple that you enjoy playing and then switch to something else, this build fits for that purpose as well. But because of these reasons, we're going to put it on an A tier. And moving down to the B tier, we're actually going to talk about Absolution. So Absolution is fun. It's phenomenal for leveling with. The problem with the end game is that it kind of excels in bossing for the most part, but it has a tendency that when you get to the point where you want to scale its damage, you kind of want to go into the Doriani's prototype approach. And as soon as you do that, your personal defenses get kind of slaughtered. However, in 3.25, mind you, I will still keep this at a B tier because of these reasons. But in 3.25, we do get access to the Lake of Kalandra. That league, it gave us some cool things still, such as the mist mirror thingy, where you basically invert the modifiers on your jewelries to give, double the negatives or double plus on stats and whatnot. And this was a very cool way to allow us to get negative lightning resistance very effectively without losing all the other defensive scaling that we needed from rare gear in general. Could maybe bump up the absolution, but I'd rather keep it on a B tier for now to see how things pan out. It's a cool build to play. I loved playing it back in the days, but there are better options these days. But leveling with it, fantastic. Most minion builds use this absolution to level with anyways. After that, I have a couple of rapid fire builds that are basically not on the list of guides that I have available to show you guys. It's more of a theoretical rankings based on what we've seen, what we learned from the patch notes, and what I've seen from other people making these builds. So there's a couple builds here, and I'm just going to rapid fire them. And basically, the first one is Arakali's Fang. Not a big fan of playing it. The one I did play came from a guy called Uber Dan on PoE Vault. Absolutely fantastic build. Had a lot of fun playing it for one league, but not longer than that. Wasn't a big fan enough to play it again. I would put this as an A tier. The spiders actually perform very well. It does require some items to get going. Just didn't like the whole idea with the snapshotting and whatnot. But an A tier for Arcalis. Golem builds have kind of fallen from grace. The usual comment is, why would you play a golem build when you can play something as beautiful as a Zoomancer? With that said, I would therefore have to put golems below Zoomancer, and I would place it somewhere between A- and B+. So, it's AB tiered. Next build would be Soul Rest. I'm not a big fan of the performance of this at the moment, so I'm going to solo that one in at a B tier. It's still playable. It's functional. If you like the playstyle, you can absolutely go for it. I just wouldn't recommend it because the other options available in the game right now are just so much better than Soul Rest from my personal perspective. Other builds that people have been asking me about is the Skelly Mages. They suck, okay? They nerfed them. Like, you guys just gotta let it go, okay? I tried holding on. I updated for one league longer than I should have. I should have let it go. No, I even league started that league. It went all right. If one could say that was all right. Just let it go. It's shit. It's a C tier at best, okay? Sometimes you just gotta let go of the past, all right? Move on. Speaking of moving on, and speaking of letting go, Elemental SRS, literally Elemental SRS and Skelly Mages are holding hand in the trash bin. All right, let them go. Let the garbage truck take them away. Forget you ever knew them. All right. Speaking of trash, we have something that's even worse than what's in the trash bin. All right. I'm not talking about Melee. They actually got buffed. We're talking about the Reaper. So why is the Reaper trash? It's one minion. Well, you can actually have more now, but that's terrible. That does bleeding damage. And bleed for minions is terrible. You can't stack it. Only you can actually have millions of bleed effects on a target, but only the one that deals the most damage per second would ever deal damage to it. It's just horrible. And having one minion scaling all of your clearing is not an effective way to play. Now, I think the best Reaper build I've seen was actually made by Previ. Very, very cool build. A lot of buttons to press. Not a big fan of that playstyle myself. But the problem is, for the Reaper to do well, it needed quite a lot of investment. And at that point, it actually did really well on bosses. My personal take is the efficiency per currency invested on the build is so bad, it makes LESRS and Skelly Mage looks like God, all right? They look like gods in comparison. Let the Skelly Mage and the LESRS go. Forget you knew them. But Reaper, you've already forgotten. That's it for this tier list video. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe for more content. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.